Disasters are described as any event that leads to suffering and need within a community which requires assistance from the outside. Somewhere in the world, a disaster is occurring almost daily. They can either be natural or man-made, include flooding, earthquakes, bioterror attacks, or bombings. The natural disaster which causes the most devastation is flooding. The recent event in West Virginia shows how quickly rising water can destroy homes, property, and even take lives. In underdeveloped or developing countries, the devastation and loss of life can be the highest because of the poorly constructed homes and the volume of people in a small populated area. There is a distinction, however, made between emergency and major disasters. Any event, including weather systems, fires, explosions, or other catastrophes which require assistance from the federal government to supplement the local and state officials in a recovery process, is considered an emergency. A major disaster may be any of the above-mentioned events that are consistent with an emergency, but they cause damage which is so severe it is well above the available emergency services. This definition led to the establishment of the Disaster Relief Act Amendment in 1974, and from this act, new plans for dealing with disasters were developed. Disasters do have different characteristics which help in the understanding of their management. They are predictability, controllability, speed of onset, length of pre-warning, duration of impact, and scope and intensity of that impact once the disaster has passed. It is then divided into 5 chronological stages, each of these with specific requirements for response and prevention. The first stage is known as the inter-disaster or non-disaster stage. This is where planning should be occurring prior to any disasters actually happening. In order to be better prepared for any disaster, communities and officials need to be proactive in not only training but in education. They also need to develop a plan of response to both natural and man-made disasters. The purpose of having a strong disaster plan is to decrease the community's vulnerability to any consequences which could be tremendous. It is also will be used to minimize issues which can arise from failures in systems. A strong disaster plan will assist individuals in surviving a disaster and in maintaining their well-being once one has occurred. The second stage of disasters is the warning or pre-disaster stage, which is when a disaster is known to be imminent. During this time, the main focus is on measures of protection to decrease the risk to individuals through communication, warnings, and evacuations if they should become necessary. Issues arise during this stage when there is inadequate communication. If the system fails, the community does not heed the warning, or there simply is not adequate time to inform the public who may potentially be affected. The third stage is the impact stage. This is where communities are left to endure what the disaster has left behind. This stage can last for days, weeks, and sometimes even longer. During this stage, an initial assessment is completed by the disaster response team to evaluate for the immediate needs and the scope of involvement necessary for the recovery process. The extent of the impact will be influenced by the community's population, the level of preparedness, and the organization of the response team. Immediate needs of critical health services and sustainment of the health service infrastructure will be an important part of this stage to help decrease in the loss of life, as well as to provide any needed emergency first aid. The fourth stage is the emergency stage, as the community is faced with the disaster's consequences and continues until the immediate threat of any new hazards has passed. This stage is often made worse by the potential isolation of the affected areas due to disaster damage, and it requires the population to be self-sufficient and help each other until assistance from the outside can arrive. The final stage is reconstruction, or the rehabilitation stage. This is when communities will begin to clean up and to heal from the disaster. Homes and buildings are either repaired or replaced as they struggle to get back to the pre-disaster state. It is a time for response crews and communities to reflect on the lessons learned. Depending on the level of destruction, this time can be very lengthy and exhausting for all affected. It may be a lifelong adjustment to life after disaster that never returns to the pre-disaster state. As disasters appear to be increasing in number and severity throughout the world, adequate preparedness and planning is imperative. Learning the 5 stages of disasters can help individuals and communities survive and recover from a devastating disaster.